evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Say, what's that sound you hear? Oh, it's the sound of America getting a little better. You can feel it happening. Last night we played you a clip from an unintentionally hilarious MSNBC town hall in which some pompous airhead reporter tries her best to explain to Trump voters why January 6th actually was an insurrection. An insurrection in which only the police had guns inside the Capitol. An insurrection in which the police welcomed the insurrectionists inside the building to insurrect. Quite an insurrection. Of course, an insurrection that went nowhere, where the leader was dressed in Viking horns and eating psilocybin mushrooms. So we thought it was pretty funny. What we didn't note, though, last night was the moment where that airhead reporter claims that a police officer was killed by the mob that day. Now, if you watch television, you've heard that line so many times that you may not even notice when people say it anymore. They've been saying it constantly for nearly 2 years. Police officers were killed, many of them. Why are they saying that? It's not true. It's provably a lie. It is in no sense accurate. No police officer was killed by the mob on January 6th. Anyone who claims otherwise is always welcome on this show live to explain who exactly was killed, what's that officer's name, and how was he killed. We don't expect any takers on that offer. So the question is, why do they keep telling us that? Well, there's a reason. There's always a reason. They're telling us that likely so we won't ask too many questions the next time we read about yet another January 6th protester going to jail. We'll just think, oh, another cop killer getting what he deserves. That's what they're hoping you will think. And they're hoping that because if you knew the truth, if you knew why they were really going to jail, you'd be very concerned. And here is the truth. Joe Biden's Justice Department is imprisoning people for having the wrong thoughts, thoughts that we all imagined were constitutionally protected, as all thoughts are. But don't take our word for it. That's just a right-wing talking point on a cable channel. You can read the court filings in January 6th cases over the past year and a half. And in virtually every instance, federal prosecutors argue in public that the political views of the defendants, not anything they actually did, not crimes they committed, but instead their personal beliefs, what they think, those beliefs are reason enough to put them behind bars. According to Joe Biden's DOJ, for example, Army veteran Jessica Watkins needed to be detained indefinitely because she had, quote, extremist and violent views regarding how to address what she believed to be a fraudulent election. Oh, she was an extremist. It's a term they never explain, but that apparently is now a crime. So we decide what extremist means, and then we put you in jail for being one. That's how that works. UCLA student Christian Secor, that was the guy who sat in Mike Pence's chair on January 6th, is now in prison. And he should be in prison, explained the Biden administration's lawyers, because he had, quote, extremist beliefs and a, quote, history of adhering to extremist ideology. Really? Again, you decide what extremist is and then put me in prison for being one. In the case of Robert Morse, that was the guy who was busted in possession of a Lego set of the Capitol. The DOJ put it this way, quote, it is difficult to fathom a more serious danger to the community than someone who tried to, quote, abort the certification of a lawful and fair election, end quote. It's the one kind of abortion they don't favor, the aborting of a fair and free election. So in every case, though, the defendant's real crime was not aborting an election. No, the real crime, and the DOJ says it right in the filings, is denying the outcome of the election. It was believing the wrong thing. It was not believing that a senile man who refused to leave his basement during the campaign somehow got more votes than any president in American history. If you refuse to believe that, you're now a felon. Question the system, and they haul you away. Those are the rules now, as hundreds of imprisoned Republicans can personally testify if they could speak. So the legal precedent has been established. You cannot deny elections. And yet, even in the face of the mounting evidence, this is now a very serious felony, there are some extremists who are not deterred. They're continuing to commit the crime of election denial, and they're bold enough to do it on video. Here, ladies and gentlemen, is one of them.
I know we're all focused on the 2022 midterm elections, and they are incredibly important. But we also have to look ahead, because you know what? Our opponents certainly are. Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election. And they're not making a secret of it. The right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislatures, yes, you heard me that correctly, state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections.
Did you hear that? Right-wing extremists will literally, you must teach that word in NPR, literally steal the next election. So that's preemptive election denial, committed by Hillary Clinton herself. But here's the thing, probably not likely that an FBI SWAT team is going to show up at Hillary Clinton's house when she's in the shower tomorrow morning. And in fact, the next time a courthouse is attacked in Portland, Oregon, or a church is torched in downtown Washington, D.C., it's unlikely that a DOJ court filing will cite what Hillary Clinton just said as an extremist ideology that led to violence. Why is that? Well, because in the considered opinion of the Democratic Party and the DOJ, it's not election denial when they do it. No, it's just election-affirming care. And there's been a lot of election-affirming care going around these past few weeks. In Washington, in the hometown newspaper owned by Jeff Bezos, the Washington Post, Max Boot just announced that, we're quoting, if the current trends hold up, Republicans are likely to take over at least the House and quite possibly the Senate too, along with many state offices. This is how democracies die, both at home and abroad. In other words, if you vote for the wrong person, that's not democracy, which, by the way, unlike dictatorship, does not always come to the conclusion that you favor. That's not democracy. That's the death of democracy. Democracy dies in both darkness and non-liberal election outcomes. Oh, okay. New York Magazine isn't waiting around for the next election. Here's their latest dispatch. Quote, there are already signs of 2020 election deniers refusing to accept their own possible defeat this year. And that's half true, of course, but New York Magazine isn't talking about Republicans. Quote, most observers are primarily worried that Trump's 2020 shenanigans may have served as a dress rehearsal for 2024. Wait, what? So that means you have Democrats 2 years before the presidential election telling us that that election is going to be rigged. But that's not undermining confidence in elections? That's not an attack on our sacred norms? Not when it happens in New York Magazine or at PBS, which, by the way, you continue to fund with your tax dollars, a channel nobody watches. The only people who watch PBS are the ones who are stuck in traction and the attendant's gone out for a cigarette and taken the remote. But they're still broadcasting. And here's what they're saying, quote, nearly 1 in 3 Republican candidates for statewide office support false election claims. So why aren't they in prison? And what is the end game of these dangerous extremists led by Donald Trump? Well, Vanity Fair figured it out. They blew the plan wide open. Quote, and then there's Donald Trump, Vanity Fair reported. He hasn't been implicated in any murders that we know of, nor is he currently trying to kill anyone, again, that we know of. He is, however, said to be actively plotting to steal the midterm elections and the presidential one after that. End quote. Did you hear that? Donald Trump is going to steal the midterm elections and then the presidential election. How is he going to do that? And isn't predicting he's going to do that, isn't that itself a crime? We can't say. We're not Merrick Garland. But we do know how he's going to do it because Hillary Clinton's been giving that away for years. Donald Trump is going to do that, as he always has done it, with help from Vladimir Putin himself. Watch.
We know the Russians hacked the DNC, hacked my campaign, etc. Trump knows he's an illegitimate president who got illegitimate foreign help. I do think that he knows that he's an illegitimate president. I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president.
You can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
Stolen from you by Putin? We better have a nuclear war with him. Oh, we're moving toward that. Too bad every Republican leader in Washington is for it. How dumb are these people? But if you take 3 steps back, you will note that nothing the January 6th defendants have ever said, even the guy with the Viking horns on acid, nothing they've said is half as crazy as what you just heard Hillary Clinton say. In federal courtrooms, January 6th defendants are being sentenced to prison because they're not exactly sure how it is that Joe Biden got 15 million more votes than Barack Obama did. Barack Obama, the rock star who was president, and yet his vice president was so stupid that even Barack Obama could barely stand to be in the same room as him, got 15 million more votes than he did? How did that work? How did Joe Biden get more votes than any president in American history? Is that not a fair question? No, it's not. It's a crime to ask. And yet no one bats an eye when Hillary Clinton tells us that Putin is literally going to steal the election. So how is it that only one side is allowed to deny the results of elections? Okay. No one answers that. Here's Joe Biden claiming that Democrats don't question election results.
This is a nation that believes in the rule of law. We do not repudiate it. This is a nation that respects free and fair elections. We honor the will of the people. We do not deny it.
We do not deny it. Unless, of course, 2 weeks out from a pivotal midterm election, we get the sense based on polling that we're about to be spanked like the bad little girls we are, at which point we start making excuses and planting the seeds for more election denial, just as we did after Donald Trump won. That's exactly what's going on now. Even as they try to destroy the careers and tear down the character of people who ask honest questions about the last election. And that would include Ron Johnson, who is the senator from Wisconsin, the Republican, one of the very few Republicans in the entire U.S. Senate who has actually improved every year that he served there. That's the opposite of the normal progression for Republicans in the Senate, in case you haven't noticed. Now, Ron Johnson is running against someone who's legitimately far out. His name is Mandela Barnes. On Twitter, Barnes once rang in the new year by praising, and few politicians do this, by praising Iran's Ayatollah because he supports BLM. And we're quoting. The first tweet of 2015 from @Khamenei IR is Black Lives Matter. Let that sink in. May this be a most wonderful year for you and yours, Barnes wrote. So he's got the Ayatollah vote. Barnes also wants to abolish ICE, defund the police, and end cash bail. So that would result in further chaos and the total destruction of American society. It might be worth following up on that. But no, the media in Wisconsin are still talking about Ron Johnson's election denial. Here's his hometown newspaper, which no one reads, in fairness, attacking him the other day for it. Quote, election deceiver, science fabulist, billionaire benefactor. After 12 years, it's time to term limit Senator Ron Johnson. So again, just to be clear, Democrats are sending people to prison for questioning the last election, trying to prevent people from getting elected in the midterm election for questioning the last election, while at the very same time telling you that the 2016 election was rigged, the midterm will likely be rigged, and we know for a fact the 2024 election is not on the level. How does this work exactly?